In the autumn of 1880, the small town of Ballyragget in County Kilkenny became the centre of a remarkable series of events that were reported as holy manifestations or apparitions. These occurrences did not happen in isolation, but were deeply connected to the mood and circumstances of Ireland at that time. The country was still living in the shadow of the recent Great Famine, and the people were deeply religious, their faith having been intensified by a period known as the Devotional Revolution, which made Catholic practice a central part of daily life. This faith was described as unshakable, with one account stating that nothing could eradicate it from the hearts of the Irish people, who had suffered greatly, but always found consolation in their religion. This created a way of thinking where suffering was seen not as a punishment, but as something that could be followed by divine comfort and signs of favour. At this very moment, a new crisis was brewing. The newspapers that reported on the strange visions also contained alarming news about everyday life. There were reports on the activities of the Land League and the politician Mr. Parnell, pointing to the ongoing land war which caused great anxiety for tenants. Most worryingly, there was a small report stating that the potato crop on the mountains was fast failing, and that even the champion varieties of potato had become affected with the blight. The memory of the Great Famine was still very fresh and traumatic, so this news created a climate of profound fear. Fear of eviction, and fear of another catastrophic food shortage. In this atmosphere, the idea of a divine visitation to console his faithful, suffering people felt very immediate and real. Adding to this sense of expectation was an event that had happened just 1 year earlier. In August 1879, there had been a major apparition of the Virgin Mary at Knock in County Mayo. The newspaper in Kilkenny explicitly linked the Ballyragget events to Knock, stating that such manifestations had taken place at Knock in Clare, in Limerick, at Ballyragget and elsewhere. This placed Ballyragget within what seemed like a national wave of supernatural events, making the strange happenings there part of a larger pattern that people were already prepared to believe in. The first sign of something extraordinary occurred on Thursday, August 5th, 1880. It was reported that a life-size vision of the Blessed Virgin was seen on the gable end of the new Catholic church, which faced the railway line. The vision was said to be visible between 9 o'clock at night and 2 o'clock in the morning. The news spread quickly through the area. By Tuesday, August 10th, several people were said to have seen the vision, and significantly, among them was a member of the local police force, whose involvement made the reports seem more credible. The Kilkenny Journal newspaper first published a story about the events on Saturday, August 14th, telling its readers that a number of people had been favoured with the most wonderful visions, and that crowds were gathering at the church every night. The excitement and the crowds only grew larger. A reporter who visited on Friday, August 21st, wrote that on the previous Wednesday night, over 200 people were packed into the church, engaged in prayer. Between 10 and 11 o'clock, about half of them witnessed what they described as a full life-size figure of Our Lady, holding the divine infant. Some of those who saw it said they felt an indescribable consolation and were completely spellbound. The reporter was careful to note that he had spoken to many of the witnesses and had assured himself that they were respectable people of sound judgment, not given to delusions, and he found their collective testimony to be very powerful. The visions then began to appear in different forms and locations. They started being seen on the windows of the church. On Wednesday, August 25th, a railway employee named Mr. Michael Power saw a distinct figure of the Blessed Virgin with 3 winged angels in front of her on a window in the north aisle. She appeared with a white scarf-like garment on her head and shoulders. Her hands were joined, and the image was accompanied by a great light. This vision lasted for 4 or 5 minutes. Later, on the same window, he saw a figure of the Virgin and Child that was so large it covered almost the entire window. Then, on Friday, August 27th, a visitor from Wexford named Mr. John Grady saw the Virgin with the Child on the 3rd window of the north aisle. He described her dress as white, with a mantle from her head to her knees, and he noticed she had one arm around the infant, whose head was leaning against the mother. He also saw 2 stars as large as his hand under the Virgin's feet. Crucially, 2 policemen who were present at the time confirmed his story in every detail. The phenomenon also attracted visitors from further away. A woman named Miss Elizabeth Dowling from Charleston Road in Dublin stated she was prepared to swear that she too had been favoured with a clear apparition of the Virgin and Child on August 20th inside the Ballyragget Church. The events seemed to reach a peak on the night of Wednesday, September 1st, 1880. Inside the church, multiple people reported having visions at the same time, but what they saw was startlingly different. The newspaper headline for this night called it, "Wonder of Wonders." A national schoolteacher from Kilmacow, named Mr. John Phelan, witnessed the figure of the Blessed Virgin and the infant Saviour suddenly appear in the corner by the Virgin's altar, and to the right of her, the head of an angel appeared. He gave a very detailed account, noting their white robes and that the figures did not seem to be resting on the wall, but were suspended a little away from it. To prove to himself it was not a trick of the light, he looked at the actual statue of the Virgin on the altar and saw its black shadow separate from the luminous apparition, convincing him it was real. At the very same time, and in the very same spot, an elderly man named Patrick Layla saw a completely different vision. He had 3 distinct visions of the Blessed Virgin, but she was surrounded by what he described as thousands and thousands of little creatures, with only heads and wings, all dancing with joy around her. The light from this scene was said to be brighter than all the lamps in the world could produce. Most amazingly, at that same moment, a group of young men who are not known for being particularly religious saw something else entirely. They did not see the Virgin or any angels at all. Instead, they saw a vivid vision of the crucifixion. They saw the cross moving from the Virgin's altar over to the wall, and they could even discern the motion of Christ's feet, as one foot was placed over the other on the cross, his knees bent forward, and his hands strained by the weight of his body. The newspaper presented these wildly different visions happening simultaneously, not as a contradiction, but as the greatest wonder of all, a sign of God's power visiting and consoling his people. Throughout this period, the local priests, the clergy, were very cautious. From the early reports, the newspaper noted that the ecclesiastical authorities were adverse to any excitement or crowding in the church and refused to offer any opinion on the extraordinary occurrences. They were also reluctant to allow the formal, sworn statements of the witnesses to be published, wanting to consider the matter carefully themselves. This caution soon turned into direct action. Shortly after the intense events of September 1st, the parochial clergy decided to step in. They issued a statement saying they were discontinuing the evening devotions and closing the church at the usual hour of 6 o'clock every evening. They gave several reasons for this. They were concerned for the health of the children. They worried that too much excitement was not good for the people, and they had noticed that some visitors were engaging in illicit drinking. They published a notice saying that if people continued to bring crowds to the church for the wrong reasons, they would be reluctantly forced to close the parish church and its grounds. The result was immediate. The apparitions stopped. The Kilkenny Journal reporter noted with a touch of irony that the manifestations, whatever their origin, appeared to be as obedient to the constituted authorities and the dictates of order as the people themselves. The town of Ballyragget quickly became as quiet and tranquil as if the wonderful events of the previous weeks had never happened. The wave of religious excitement that had drawn thousands of visitors was extinguished not by a lack of belief among the people, but by the decisive action of the local priests, who chose to prioritize social order and the spiritual well-being of their parish over the promotion of a potentially disruptive supernatural wonder.